Hello, everybody. Kia ora koutou katoa. Haere mai ki tēnei wānanga o tātou. Ko Amy taku ingoa, ko Pauataha Nui Parish toku whare Karakia. So good evening, everybody. It's such a delight to see all your faces on the screen here. Thank you for joining us from the comfort of your own home. My name's Amy Ross, and I'm the Eco Church Community Coordinator for the Greater Wellington region. Now, Eco Church is a project of Arosa, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Arosa means the rock. And here with me tonight, you're joining members of our team as well, and the Board of Trustees for Arosa. So we are a diverse collection of people tonight from all around Aotearoa, and it's really exciting to have you all tuning in. As I said, Eco Church, which is a project of Arosa, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Many of you will have been here last Monday night when we were together discussing, among other things, the resources that are available through the Eco Church network to support your church to take action to care for creation. And we also spent some time discussing the theological imperative, the reason why Eco Church exists, and the motivation behind Eco Church. Just to refresh your memory, here's the project goal. We want to see church communities across Aotearoa actively caring for this earth. Pretty straightforward, but we're excited about it. We're really excited about it, and we hope you are too. Okay, so our focus is on taking practical action and setting goals, motivated from the kaupapa of serving Jesus and being part of our faith journey, being a holistic journey that includes care for creation. So tonight we will be focusing in quite a bit more detail on what some of those actions and goals can be. And I suspect that's what many of you have just signed up for this wānanga for. So we're really excited to hear some of your ideas too. This is the plan for the evening. We have we've developed a self-assessment for churches, which was originally launched in the UK and has been modified for the New Zealand context. And that will be our key tool for this evening. So you can see we're going to have a bit of a little interactive activity, breakout discussion, time for you to ask questions, and a bit of deeper thinking about how to choose goals for your church congregation. Just a reminder again that the network for Eco Church goes right from the bottom of the South Island to the top of the North Island. So do spread the word to others who you may know who might be interested in journeying deeper into creation care with their church. We're in conversation with lots of different churches. And also a quick reminder, all of the things that we discuss are available on the website. So, basically all of them. So do check that out and spend a bit of time exploring around there if you haven't already. Big thanks to Iris, who's been at the heart of developing all of those resources on the website, and to the other contributors. Okay, so here we have a highlight sort of slide for the self-assessment worksheet. I really love this worksheet because if you want to start taking environmental action with your church, it can be very impossible to know where to start sometimes. Lots of people have wonderful ideas. Sometimes they're in competition with one another. But this self-assessment worksheet is quite comprehensive and it has, let's say, a couple of pages, between 2 to 4 pages of ideas under each of these 5 headings: leadership, worship and teaching, church buildings and facilities, church land and grounds, community and global engagement, and sustainable living. And this is available to download for free from the Eco Church website. It's pretty easy to find. We can also pop a link in the chat. Essentially, when your church decides, oh, we'd like to explore becoming an eco church, you can download this and either share it digitally or print it off if you feel that's helpful for your discussion. And you can identify actions that your church is already taking, which is really important because many churches, as we know, are already doing wonderful things, and they sort of need a coherent way to capture that and to communicate why that's important to their church culture. And then you can consider how to go a bit further with some of those actions or to add on new ones. And we'll unpack tonight a bit more how different churches have done that and how you might like to do that. Just to highlight on the website, you can see there little examples of the headings where resources have been put up. Now, there are links, and there are links to external websites, and there are items that you can download for free to support your church taking action in some of these key areas. And the website is constantly under development. So keep checking back there and you'll find new things, even whole new sections. So for example, it wasn't too long ago that one was added on climate anxiety or eco-anxiety and mental health within the environmental response movement. That's a really lovely one because, you know, we know that it can be quite tough being an advocate in this space over time. So there's some good resources available there. There's also recently been one added on rural eco-theology. We will explore in a bit more detail what's included under these headings. So here we go. Hold on to your seats. I hope you're ready for this. We have leadership, worship, and teaching as the number one section. And this is very close to my heart. So I spent quite a few years working for secular environmental organisations that aimed to respond to climate change, among other things. We're also concerned about the biodiversity crisis and pollution, including plastics pollution and other forms of environmental degradation in eco-church. But my background was a bit more in climate change, and yet theologically, I was tracking through some theological studies and pastoral development at the same time. I just happened to be married to a priest. And so leadership, worship, and teaching, I feel is key to supporting us as people who would like to take action to care for the environment as part of our faith journey over the long haul, including all sorts of different elements. On the website, we've divided it into things like, oh, I've just lost my bit here, but so you've got segments on not only musical worship, but liturgy and other aspects of worship. You've got curriculums for children and some ideas for youth and some links to activities for youth. You've got, let's see, small group resources. There's actually links to guest speakers who can provide sermons and some pastoral leadership and creation care. So this is an example of a church who we're just having a small group discussion there, but there are so many different forms of worship in our congregations where we can integrate deeper teaching about the theology of creation care, of hope, of lament, of the work that Christ has done on the cross and how that relates to the whole of creation, and so on and so forth. This is, you know, you can have a more traditional expression. That was actually a harvest festival service. You can have really modern expressions where you include in your worship music some singing that is relevant, that actually allows people to express their joy and delight in creation, but also clearly articulate their hope for creation. And then, you know, getting outdoors, just getting right to the heart of it, and is another way of learning and worship, of discipleship growth. And this is, I think, an E3 camp. Arosh is involved in supporting young people to go on outdoor adventures, but it's good for any age, and to do Bible studies and to talk about this journey outdoors. I'm just going to flick through to give you a few examples from the different categories, and then we'll be taking your ideas. Okay, and we'll also be hearing from somebody who's demonstrated what they can do in their church. But church buildings and facilities, well, we're covering in this category things like waste. Energy is a big part of it as well. When it comes to waste, this partnership with Karakia, a zero waste organisation, is a really helpful tool for assisting your church to make a longer term goal to divert up to 50% or more of waste from landfill that would ordinarily be generated in the everyday activities of your church. And so this is an example of a workshop in Auckland where that was taking place. This partnership is one that Arosha has with Karakia around the country, and we're working on making the workshops available as widely as possible. So do be in touch if you think this is something your church might like to do. There's great presenters who can really bring to life how waste is generated and how it can be diverted. And it's an accessible way, you know, for people to understand consumption and make changes. Then, of course, other aspects under buildings are the design principles and churches. We had an online kōrero a while back looking at greening your church building project. You can read a bit more about that, and you also can email some of the contributors. In fact, we have some here tonight. I think Caitlin Lee is with us tonight. So we've been very grateful to have expertise in our network for churches wanting to green their new church builds or their church renovations, but there are basic principles that we can all be working towards in our church buildings to capture energy better, to reduce the consumption of energy, and to think about contributing to the development of more green energy generation. And in particular, another resource to mention here is the carbon calculator for churches, which we are hoping will be available. The plan is that it will be available by October this year. And this one is where you can use it, like if anyone's done I'd be really interested to know, actually, you could write in the chat if you've ever completed an individual carbon calculator or a business or organizational carbon calculator. Perhaps you could just pop that in the chat box, because that means they'll give us an indication of how familiar you are with this type of tool. But essentially, it's one that you can use to understand where the emissions are coming from within your church buildings, the waste, the food consumption and disposal, travel and transport, and your purchasing policies. So that one's worth exploring when it becomes available, because you'll be able to make a quantitative goal to reduce that over time or offset what you can't reduce. This is just what I was mentioning before. And here we have a quick little video of an example of purchasing in a church. Facilities are important, how they're used. You can actually have more control than you might feel you have over how external users act in your church building. So having part of your booking policy for external users is a really great way. And this is my friend Kelly, and she's the I was going to say the operations manager. I'm not sure if that's quite the right word, but essentially she oversees the property and operations of the church that I work at, and she has been able to improve and build on what was a pre-existing great policy to use more eco-friendly products, but also to consider all the external users of the building, because as we know, churches are used by lots of groups. So inviting them, basically saying, if you're going to use our building, these are our policies. And so that is having a much bigger impact than just on your congregation as well. Let's see if this little video is going to work for you. Oh, actually the sound will be quiet, but essentially she's talking about the refillables that they use and the green cane toilet paper and hand towels, which they've chosen to do to reduce their impact on the environment. All right, number 3, church landing grounds. Bike racks are an example that some churches are popping in. That's over in Ponsonby in Auckland. That's a really nice example. Many churches are doing community gardens. I'm just giving you a taster, but there are so many different things that churches can do with their grounds and the land that they're responsible for, if they're intentional about caring for the environment in those choices. But this is, yeah. So I've got a few examples here that the self-assessment covers. And I'm going to test you a bit later on this, so on all these categories. So I hope you're listening and can remember a few things when it comes to your turn to pop the ideas down on our shared whiteboard. So we're thinking about getting native plants in the ground, encouraging local wildlife to come and feel at home in the church land. I mean, not every church has land, we know that, but if you do, if your church has a piece of land that you're responsible for, even small piece, you can do some great things. Lots of churches, as I mentioned, do food growing. Some do predator control. So that's a really quite a nice thing. It doesn't take up much space. If you're in an area where you could be trapping rats or mice or other predators, depending on how urban you are, can make quite a big difference that way for our biodiversity. Having a pond or a little water body, compost, worm farms, and also making sure that your church land and grounds is inviting for contemplation and recreation, because of course you can facilitate people's connection with God through their time spent in nature. This is from Church Working Bee, and this one has a community garden, but it's also a fruit and veggie co-op, so that's an example we can explore a bit later if we'd like to. Okay, and now here, just to touch briefly on this before I invite our guest speaker to be interviewed about this one, community and global engagement. This aspect of the church's self-assessment is looking at things like communications with your local community, understanding creation care as part of mission, even to the point of giving financially from your church to support this as part of your mission and ministry, thinking about church investments where you can make a difference, so that they're actually assisting the response to environmental crises, not exacerbating them through your investments. How you connect with tangata whenua, how you connect with Māori guardians of the land, the Kōtuitui, who may have been working hard to protect and restore diversity before you. The events that occur in your local community which support green initiatives. Thinking about advocacy in your local council or regional jurisdiction, so that if your church is passionate about getting more people to travel in a low carbon way to church, maybe active transport or so on, then you can be informing yourselves and advocating for infrastructure that supports that. You could be a recycling hub for those hard to recycle items. Actually, there's a little bit of a project for that going on in my church at the moment. And it's fantastic because the initiative for that has come from a lady who started a recycling hub for the hard to recycle things in our area, like batteries and bottle cap lids that don't meet the right criteria, and well, a whole host of things. And she started that in her retirement village. It's so inspiring, and then has taken the initiative into our congregation. Therefore, we can receive things from the community as well. And yes, now beach cleanups, all sorts of wonderful community things locally and making a global impact. I'm going to leave it on this one here, and I will invite Mary Hutchinson, who's a board member for Korōria, to unmute herself. And she's involved in a church. Although you're far away, Mary, at the moment, you are involved in a church in Wellington, not too far from where I'm based. So welcome. Please tell us about your eco-church's ambitions for community engagement.
Oh, kia ora tātou, and thanks so much, Amy and Iris and Crystal. And I'm very conscious that Caitlin from St Michael's Kelburn is also joining in, and may well actually know more about the history, because I haven't been at part of the congregation for that long. But we're very fortunate in Kelburn, central Wellington, to be very close to green areas, already established green areas. So close to the university campus, particularly green areas like the botanical gardens, and there's several reserves. And so there are people working voluntarily, as well as obviously professionally, throughout this area. And then it's not far, well, across the road really, in terms of the next large restoration conservation area. And of course we are very blessed by not being far from Zealandia as well. So the increase in bird life is overflowing, as many of you will know, into far-flung places like Miramar in Wellington. So closest and within our parish, we have the Pōpahina Reserve. So this is an area in the history I'm a little patchy on, but it's got a lot of very large old pines in it. So it's been planted in that way. I hope you can hear me okay. Sorry, should have checked that out. good, thanks. And there's an old mine of some sort in there. There's some quite steep slopes, and the group has been working there. It's also sometimes referred to as Kiwi Claw because it's got sort of 3 arms to it. So Wellington City Council is in partnership with the group that works here, and also Think Forest and Bird. So I first heard about it, in fact, when I first turned up at the church, and it was a big spread about it in the occasional paper newsletter that goes in the letterboxes of the whole parish, saying that they really wanted more volunteers. They also have predator control, and they've been invited because they do this so well to, in fact, extend predator control lines out, including across to Botanical Gardens. But going back to the actual area, lots of weeds, lots of noxious things like we all have in our green areas, and lots of planting going on. So the most recent thing is that a path has been paid for by the council. It's not quite finished yet, but a good, properly made path, which will enable access more easily into some of the harder to reach parts. So I know Caitlin goes to the group. There's a couple of other people who are part of St Michael's to go to the group, and I'm a bit of a restoration project junkie. So I go to lots of different groups from time to time, which is always a delight. So there, when we had our launch as well as an eco church, which was just in March of this year. In fact, the coordinator of the group is not a regular member of the congregation, but who wrote the article in the newsletter. She was going to come and speak, but unfortunately got sick. But she had fantastic slides, which I wanted to speak to as part of that, to see what was going on right in our backyard, essentially. Yeah. So we hope that that will grow. More parishioners will be involved, and even possibly, we haven't quite planned it all yet, Caitlin, but and Iris, but that we could perhaps go as a congregation to celebrate the launch and blessing of the track, which will connect the Aro Valley to Kilburn Parade, for those of you who know the area a bit better.
Cool, thank you, Mary. I'm just a stand-in. Kia ora, I'm Crystal, in case you missed it. We've just had a little technical problem with Amy's computer dying and restarting.
Oh dear.
So luckily we have a backup team. So just shows why we always encourage people to work in teams, right? So if one computer dies, there's several backups. Thank you, Mary. Sorry, I was slightly distracted by the messages from Amy saying my computer died, but she'll be back soon. But does anyone have any questions for Mary? My ears perked up when I heard about the predator control you're doing. Love to see more of that next time I'm in Wellington. Anyone else got any questions? How do you get your people from church to check traps? Or after church, during the week? How does that work?
Actually, just to clarify, the predator lines, trap lines and things are coordinated by the reserve coordination team. They've got 4 or 5 people who are particularly interested in that. And so I'm not sure, Iris or Caitlin might be able to fill me in whether any parishioners are specifically doing that at the moment. But they have asked for more volunteers, and they also came to our somewhat shrunk down parish fair back in summer and had a stall there, and I think they've been regularly at that, so that they could show what the traps were like, and you could take one, a free one, for backyard trapping, as well as get involved in the reserve area, and then these extended areas that they're trying to join up the lines in the central city, particularly in the green areas.
Right. Jim, would you like to ask your question?
Oh, kia ora. Just curious about, like, are there sort of like rules around what people offer to do? Like instead of saying, oh yeah, we'll set traps or something, do they, like, is there a way of saying it in a polite way that we're voluntary, so we can only sort of do a bit, or like maybe only do a season, or yeah, we can't give you one contact name, like, because we're a group of people? Or how does that conversation kind of go?
Yeah, I think it depends on the, obviously just forming the relationships. When that relationship was already formed, in fact, I think between a vicar and the person who coordinates the group, because of having, obviously this article in the magazine. So it's really just what people feel that they are interested in. It don't have to have any skills, because they will advise and train, and the health and safety side of things also is there in all groups. So there's a range of places where you can walk, where you can work. For instance, in fact, the coordinator's backyard backs onto this reserve. So all you have to do is walk past her vegetables, and you'll have some weeds to pull out, and right through to much more exertional sorts of stuff, chasing, asparagus vine and that kind of thing, off track. So, and the trapping again is optional. So there's both the level of the individual households, and then, but also volunteering if you're keen to go out and be part of a roster at various intervals. And again, training is part of that, and that actually very clued up as well. With, they have QR codes on the traps, so ask me how that works, but it does. Apparently, you can record your kills, and it all gets fed into a database. Yeah, so I hope that somewhat answers that. Others will have experience in this as well, I'm sure. Yes.
Thank you, Mary.
And occasionally is fine. They're always welcome. Even if you can only go, twice a year or something. Oh, you're back, Amy.
That's
Didn't realise we'd lost you.
I'll hand up.
Back from the dead.
Yeah, hand back to Amy. Thank you, Amy. Glad you revived your computer.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It always happens in the most opportune moments, doesn't it? In opportune moments. But yeah, it's good to be back with you, and thanks for taking over, Crystal, and thank you, Mary, for sharing that story about your church's engagement with this local community project. I think it's really exciting. Yeah, I can't wait to see how things keep unfolding for St. Michael's in Calvin.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
well done. Like, for every one of you who's been encouraging your church to connect with different groups or to just take action on their own, just hats off to you. We know it's not always that easy, and it takes that energy and that commitment. So yeah, just huge congratulations to you guys for all that you're doing. We've got one more component of that 5-part Eco Church's self-assessment, which we're up to now, the final part, sustainable living. But I'm not going to talk too much about this one, other than to say it includes ideas and items on sort of the obvious areas, different aspects of sustainable living: waste, energy, travel and transport, food, water, and then it talks a little bit, it gives suggestions or asks you, whether your church is communicating well in these spaces and facilitating growth for households in their journey of taking action in those key areas of sustainable living. So put my screen share back. We're going to now, I won't put my screen share back. We're going to now give you the opportunity to add, to see which of these ideas, have stuck with you, and which ones you'd like to add to the conversation, really, because it's all open and it's all collaborative. So I'm going to turn on a tool called the whiteboard. You may have used this already on Zoom, but if you haven't, it's quite straightforward. The 5 headings of the Eco Church's self-assessment will be there. Okay, so now you can all actually contribute to this whiteboard, and so we'd like to see your ideas listed under the different headings for areas perhaps that your church is already engaged with, or things that we've mentioned tonight, or things that you think should be included under these headings. I can see beautiful green spaces, solar panels on the roof. Worst case scenario, unmute yourself and we'll add it in for you if you just would like to say it out loud. But we would like everyone to be able to contribute. Compost bins is such a good one for your church land. You can see someone's writing about worship songs under leadership, worship and teaching. I'm going to put the link into one of my favorite ecologically relevant worship CDs, which is not too old, it's quite recent. So if you haven't heard of it, you might enjoy checking it out. Well, I like this idea under community engagement for recycling hub for foil packets, which can go to a specific collector chip packet project New Zealand, who use them to make blankets for the homeless. I think I've heard of that. That's brilliant. Under sustainable living, green tips in the weekly bulletin. Fantastic. Lots of ideas under buildings and facilities. I can see solar panels on there. If your church is exploring solar, please be in touch with us, because we're building up a network of different churches who are exploring that at the moment, supporting solar energy or hosting a solar array on their roof. We'd love to hear about others who are doing it. Brilliant. We've got resources, purchasing, water, we're using grey water, planting lawns out as natives. Oh, that's exciting. Good way to host native wildlife. Under community and global engagement is we're hoping to contact our local council about planting fruit trees in like the public spaces, so that then it's like beautifying our towns, but also providing fresh fruit for the neighborhood. Can someone type that for us? Brilliant. It's coming up there, I think, thanks to. Thank you, Iris. That's a great idea. Yeah, I've actually just been chatting with there was a church up in Auckland who were planting fruit trees recently for that kind of purpose as well. It was in a lower income neighborhood, and they were wanting to make fresh fruit available and obviously just beautify their space as a very public space, but they're on a corner, and unfortunately they had just been notified while I was there. They just planted out these little baby fruit trees that a car had driven through the fence, and they were just trying to identify whether any of those little fruit trees had survived, and in fact most of them did. But yeah, so that's a beautiful idea. I love all these wonderful ideas. It's fantastic. Many of these ideas are mentioned in the church's self-assessment. It's like some of you have read it or something. No, but it's great. And some of them aren't, so it's brilliant to have these diverse ideas. You can see, yeah. Even caring for a teeny piece of land, someone's put down under land and grounds. Well, even teeny pieces of land, yeah, can still be precious and in God's sight, I think, but even in people's sight. So much of this is context specific, which we'll get on to discussing next. Intentional choice of electricity providers come up, and energy efficient light bulbs, both good ideas. Yeah, really good. Okay, and having somebody had Richard and Lisa Story as guest speakers, brilliant. They're part of the Arosha network. For those of you who might not know Richard and Lisa, Richard was one of the co-founders of Arosha, I think way back in the day in New Zealand. Arosha has been going for about 15 years, so far longer than the Eco Church project, which only launched in 2020. But it's all connected, they're all connected efforts, and it's so lovely that Richard and Lisa were able to come back and do speak to some churches over the past year. Time switches on all heaters and lights. Now that's a very good one, isn't it? Especially those outdoor security lights and things, if can be tricky with sensors and so on. But if some areas where heaters and lights are left on can just be chewing through, using up the energy unnecessarily unless they're on timers. So that's a really good one. Oh, and somebody in the chat has also mentioned foraging for walnuts and fruit, where things were available in local green spaces, and that had been published actually in a council newspaper. Oh, that's a cool idea. Just getting people to access fruit and nuts. where they're available anyway. And I can see some ideas for community and global engagement, including 350 Aotearoa. They do some great advocacy, and that's wonderful. Definitely, your eco-church community can provide space to kind of work together to make submissions on aspects of responding to these environmental issues that are relevant locally and globally. So we see that happening quite a bit in the network. Okay, thank you everybody for your brilliant ideas. Now we're going to break you out into groups so you can discuss with others in your group this key question: which component of those 5 components, those 5 headings of the self-assessment, is the most important in your opinion, and why? Okay. There we are. We're all back together. Wonderful. I hope you had the chance to have a nice discussion there in your breakout rooms. And I'm really looking forward to hearing back some of the things that arose for you. So let's start with breakout room 1. Could you share with us, whoever's been nominated, just a few thoughts emerging from your discussion?
Hi, so I'm group 1. Hopefully I articulate succinctly what we thought. I think the biggest thing for us was around, out of the 5, the one that was most important was kind of the one that spoke to us and where our church is and where we are as people on the journey, I suppose, if that makes sense, that all of them are valuable and they all speak to us at different places on the journey. But 2 of the ones that really were like, oh, this is really important, is sustainable living, and getting our churches and our communities and globally on board with being more sustainable, but also getting our buildings up to snuff. And because that's part of sustainable living as well, is not having old, drafty, cold New Zealand buildings. Yeah, so I hope that kind of covers ours. Thanks.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. It's like no pressure, right, when you have to represent a whole group discussion, but I think they'll look upon your report back with favor. Don't worry, we're all kind people here. That's great. I mean, I could wait till the end for full disclosure, but I think you'll all probably be reaching a similar conclusion that there's no external clear right winner of those 5 that comes out. In different contexts, different ones will be more important than others. So yeah, very much look forward to hearing in your different contexts what is key for you. So sustainable living is big part of it. Actually, from some of my background has been in climate governance and response to climate change. It's interesting, I was over in the UK for a long time working for the Sustainability Research Institute, and a report came out for their committee for climate change saying that 62% of the change of the emissions reduction, 62% of the pathway to net zero needed to come from behaviour change, which I thought was really interesting. So that touches quite highly on sustainable living and in fact the whole importance of eco-church. So it's not just always infrastructure changes, but behaviour change is really important. So yeah, let's hear from group 2.
Yeah, so we talked about being part of a circular economy, and we talked about a product called Saveboard, which I posted in the chat. And then one of us talked about worship, so that being the thing that churches just do, and then everything will kind of stem out of that. Yeah, so making creation and ecology more about what we preach about and what we talk about, and the subject of worship songs, maybe not just once a year. Our church does it once a year during there's St. Francis, I think, day when we do that. And another point we made, well, I actually contributed most to buildings because I know most about that. But one of the people talked about how their church, Central Baptist in Wellington, is a central city church, which is no green space. And so it makes it hard for them to implement the sorts of ideas that were under the buildings with community gardens and green roofs and things like that. Well, a green roof actually might work, so they thought that most of the things that they could do with their church were to encourage people to have sustainable practices at home rather than at their church. And that's kind of where we got to.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Caitlin. So just, I think in summary, somebody was talking about leadership, worship and teaching and how things flow from that. You have expertise in the buildings, so there's a lot that can be done in that space, including Save Board. I heard that at the beginning. And yeah, and also the context, the location of the church, just considering a central city church might not have a lot of green space, being mindful of your context. Great, thank you. Group 3.
Kia ora koutou. We had 5 people in our group, and I think we managed to name all 5 categories as the most important. We had a really good chat, and I think there was an emphasis actually on local community actions that help the church to be visible in the wider community. So as a way of engaging with our wider community, a sense of mission, but also a way of empowering people. So that's sustainable living. I mentioned the importance of facilities and buildings for just practically reducing carbon footprint. So that's an emphasis of the Presbyterian Church at the moment. We've just made a denominational, I guess, commitment to try to reduce our carbon footprint. And so for me, one of the big practical questions is, okay, what's actually going to reduce footprint the most, and what are the quick wins? How do we get there? But we also talked about the importance of worship and teaching, recognizing that climate action and fighting anxiety and doomsday mentality is an act of conversion, a conversion to the God of hope and the God who raises up a new creation in Jesus Christ. So yeah, all 5 got our thumbs up.
Amen. Yeah, so beautifully put there, Jordan. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go on to group 3. I just think that was really beautifully put. Sorry, yeah, group 4 actually. Am I right? Yeah, group 4.
Yep, that's me. That's us. So like everybody else, I think we decided that it really depends on the passion of the group of people that are keen to get engaged. And so it could, that just, you know, it could be any of the 5. Or combination of the 5, and we had some lovely examples from the different churches that were represented of the different passions of the group. So one group is working very much with their young people because they don't have grounds, so they're working very much with young people so their voice is heard on climate change. And they've got a Ramblers and Riders group, which is a fun group, but it could extend to eventually to cycling or walking to church. Another group very much involved with caring for the poor in the city, and so there was keenness about the chip packet project, which was new to some of us. Another group was had really wrestled with getting external users on board with the recycling, the bin system, the waste management system, but that was a focus for them. And another church was had quite a lot of children's ministry, so growing and eating the vegetables that they grew, and then dealing with the scraps from that. So that's us, I think.
Thank you, Irene. That is a broad range of different actions and interests expressed by those churches in your group. That's great to hear. Yeah, thank you. Just touching on a broad range of ideas and ideas that can be, I think, probably integrated by others as well, and very contextual. Right, group 5. Who's representing group 5 this evening?
Kia ora koutou, from Wellington Central here. Yeah, we had Tawa Baptist and Paraparima Baptist and Māori from Pātanui. So I think it depends, like there was a couple of us highlighted that the leadership and teaching and worship is kind of really important, especially for engaging people. And our church is very much at the beginning of this journey, so that seems to be a really key part. And then there was others who have already a bit further down the line, like Māori, and she told of lots of exciting things going on there in Pātanui. And then there was Andrew from Paraparaumu, and he mentioned having been part of this Resound Psychology course, a 3-week course where Amy comes and talks, and but also where there's teaching, worship, and small group work, and that's kind of was really key in engaging the congregation. So that's something we might want to talk about ourselves. I think that was there. Mike, sorry if there's things I've missed, but the buildings also, we spoke about that, a couple of the groups did, and us particularly because we're in a process at the moment of considering what kind of changes or upkeep we might do to buildings, and so how to do that in a sustainable but affordable way. So yeah, there's lots of choices there, and I guess it'd be interesting sharing knowledge with those who've already done that sort of thing would be neat. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, I hope that's, thank you. Great. That's yeah, it's really interesting to hear a bit about some of the different churches where the different stages of the journey, from integrating it right a bit more deeply at the beginning of worship and teaching, and then just starting off. Others, Pāwatahanui Parish has had it integrated into leadership, worship and teaching for a long time. I think it's probably fair to say, and Māori herself has played a key role in making that possible, so the actions flow more easily when the congregation is aligned in that way, and really convicted, I would say, about the importance of this all. And then you mentioned there that there was a little series at Paraparaumu. Yes, it was a joy to be part of that series last year, and you can see in the chat, I've popped the link for the doxecology music. It's near the top of the chat box, but if you go to that website, they also have links to the to a sort of Bible study series. And my understanding is that Paraparaumu, the leaders used the Bible study series to develop a mini series of teaching and preaching. It's a great resource, actually, that doxecology stuff. So yeah, more than just worship. And then as part of that, I shared on creation and hope. So lots of good ideas there. Now with our final group, group 6, let's hear from you.
Kia ora. Yeah, so sorry, I'm just trying to think of the things that haven't been already covered. So all of these parts are really important, and I think one of the key things we found was it's a sort of a phases and stages approach, because some of them will bubble up to the top a bit more than others, and we did spend a lot of time sharing great ideas. So for example, Everybody Eats is a process or an organisation which I think spread across the country, but recognizing that lots of churches are doing lots of things already and possibly don't think that they are environmental as such. So for example, there might be a church doing a community garden and think, oh, it's just a community garden, but then there's an aspect of it that's good for the environment, and a little bit like that Everybody Eats thing. If you include another group, you can leverage off that. So I'm not saying it's an answer, but for inner city churches, I think one of the things Everybody Eats in Auckland is asking for at the moment is help with their raised gardens. So yeah, it's just being able to look at something and think, well, maybe what we're already doing contributes, and really interested to hear more about the assessments, because it's a good way to take it to the church and especially the leadership, because another thing we found that was important, if the leadership is buying into it or supportive of it or motivating of what people are doing, then it's a heck of a lot easier to get that momentum.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim from St. Mary's. Yeah, and that's actually a perfect lead into some of the final things I'd quite like to share with you this evening. So I'm going to pop my screen share back on. The importance of integrating leadership, of the leadership being on board, and how we use that self-assessment well to engage your whole congregation. Now, these are just some of my ideas from my experiences of speaking with different churches and of using it myself. So, like, full disclosure, the church that I'm currently at is the third one that I've been on the eco-church journey with. Turns out we move around churches a fair bit. It happens when you're married to a church leader, but that's over a long period of time, So you will have your own ideas about how to use it well, but I'm just going to share a few of mine. Preparing the congregation has been really important. And also, I'm not saying that actually I've done this well, so I've experienced the other side of it as well in different churches, having a go at just using the tool, on my own or so on, or just with one person. But yeah, speaking with others, it has emerged that to prepare your congregation, you need to be having conversations a while in advance of using the self-assessment. You might use it yourself to get inspired about what you can do, but then you could put out a notice for other interested members of your congregation. If there's only one or two of you at the beginning who are aware of this and want to begin taking things further, you could invite people together just for a cup of tea and a chat at the beginning, explain to them what eco-church is and what the tool is, and then make a separate date to use it together. The theology of the church is obviously important for preparing people's hearts and minds to integrate this into their conception of mission, and we did cover that in last week's wānanga. So if you missed that, you can just go back and watch that, or explore some of the resources on our website. And timing, is key. So as we all know, church events, got to be thoughtful about the time that you do them. So some churches have used the self-assessment tool for group mind mapping successfully in evening meetings. But one church I went to, they did it on the night when their home groups would normally meet, and they just invited all of their home groups to meet together and to essentially use the 5 headings to mind map where they were at and where they would like to go as a church congregation. And they ended up with about 25% of the congregation. It was a church of about 150. So I think, that worked out quite well for them, but for others, getting participants at an evening meeting, is going to be hard work. You might like to do it after church. So I'll be doing a workshop, and I've done this before, where we're going to be using the self-assessment tool. This is in a couple of months with a church, and it will be there'll be the service in the morning, which will have a sermon and worship themed around caring for creation. Then there'll be a shared lunch, and then we'll go straight into using the self-assessment tool. So just thinking hard about your timing. And yes, it is quite useful sometimes to get an outside speaker in to stimulate that thinking, and so that the volunteers who are leading on using the self-assessment can do so almost off the back of it being fresh in people's minds. And so if you'd like to, there is a network of speakers that you can look at through the Arosha website, linked also through the eco-church website. And you might find that that's a great way to engage your congregation. You do want to do it with more than one person. It can take a really long time if you work with a whole group to go through the whole assessment, but breaking it up under those 5 headings is good. And some of the ways that I've seen it done is when people have the 5 headings on tables and people move around the room, so they touch on the different headings. I'm just popping a few ideas out there. I know that some of this will be, things you could easily think of yourself, but just to throw them out there. Some people do it with sticky notes, so if they're not quite sure which category their idea comes into, then they can sort of have an initial sort, and then they can have some discussion and debate by moving the sticky notes of those ideas around. Under which heading do we think this comes under, and like, do we have enough, you know, under each of the headings? Obviously, if you're doing it in person, do make it fun. You know, you want people to have a good time while they're doing it and to feel inspired and excited about it. So try and have some food and drink. We're going to talk a bit more next week about the culture of Arosa and how hospitality and food is such a key part of the journeys that we have together, like in many churches. Do communicate the results. So once you've invested time and invited others to invest their time in using the self-assessment, please feed that back to them. Like, if you can summarize some of the feedback that either, you know, the completed questionnaire, which shows people what they're already doing and gives some ideas of what they might like, you know, the church has agreed they might like to do. You know, if you can email that around to people or make it available, invite others to come and talk to you about it, that will be much better than having it disappear into a black hole and never seen again. And celebrate what is going on. So use it as a chance to say, hey, like, I think somebody mentioned you might already be doing something in your church, like a community garden or so on, that may have been motivated by mission, you know, or outreach or something in your church vision. But if it has an ecological component, you know, pat yourselves on the back, celebrate and say, hey, as a church, actually, we're already doing a few things. And some people like to take celebrations to the next level, and you might have a monthly eco celebration, like give a round of applause or a little, you know, how churches do birthdays, give a little reward to those who are taking action in the environmental space. And then this is just sort of like a real rough Venn diagram idea to help you consider the different aspects that you'll be weighing up as you choose your goals. So once the self-assessment has been completed, most churches like to make a 1 to 3 year kind of action plan, so that it doesn't have to be too comprehensive. Sometimes it's just bullet points under the headings, but to be able to identify, you know, where they're going to invest their energies. You can't do everything all at once. So you'll be weighing up for some people tonight have mentioned that, you know, they're motivated to make the reduction of carbon emissions, you know, almost like the low-hanging fruit, the biggest things that they can do as fast as possible. That's a key motivator. So, you know, usually in that case, you're going to be looking a bit at energy and transport and so on. There's lots of resources you can use to identify. But at the same time, you're weighing that up against where's the skill and where's the time and passion from people in your congregation. Hopefully there are people in your congregation who have skills that will come out of the woodwork in these conversations, and you might find that they haven't necessarily connected their practical skills or their personal or professional interest in one area with this aspect of church life. But now's the chance, you know, and you want to harness their interest at the beginning. Have a think about who can help you. So resources available in your local community. It might be that your local council, most councils these days have a climate change policy, a sustainability plan, and it's integrated into town planning. So have a look around and see what other community groups can offer to support your church on this journey. That might inform what you choose to do. And of course, connecting it to your church vision and mission. So this can be done implicitly or explicitly. And just to give you an idea of how one church has done it very explicitly. So in Anglican churches, some of the churches complete mission action plans, and these are 5-year plans. Basically, what is the purpose of our church? What are we here for, and how do we be a community of disciples over these 5 years? So our local eco church reps actually identified the goals that they were keen for the church. It was a group effort, keen for the church to implement over 1 year, a 1 year period. And then they literally put a column down the side of that goal and wrote how that connects with the church's mission and action plan. And so when that went to the decision-making kind of body, I know in different churches it will be called different things, your board, your elders, your vestry, your parish your parish council, whatever it's called, you know, they will want to hear how any eco-church efforts clearly connect to the church vision and mission. And that's a strategic way to embed it longer term beyond just being the responsibility of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 key volunteers. So I've also been reminded how important it is that we pray and listen, you know, for inspiration in choosing the goals where you're going to invest your energy. Take some time to do this, because we're in this for the long haul, guys. You know, the problems aren't going to go away in a hurry. And you know, you're part of this Holy Spirit inspired movement. So let's hear what you're being called to address in your local community or globally. And then I've just got to be honest, you know, in my experiences of Eco Church, you know, like all of us in church volunteering, you're going to go through highs and lows, and some people who had energy to lead might need to opt out for various reasons. The plan will change, resources may become more or less available unexpectedly. Just think about it as being a long-term strategy. We're aware of the urgency of these problems, aren't we? I'm sure that's why you're here tonight. You know, you're concerned about climate change, you're concerned about biodiversity decline and plastics pollution, and they're urgent problems. But also, like all discipleship, you know, like all areas of social justice and our discipleship and everything, we're serving God for the long term in this area. So just bearing that in mind. And there is quite a bit of external funding available. I was at a Sustainability Champions workshop up in Auckland not too long ago, and they were just outlining the various funds available for community groups taking initiative in these areas. Well, the same thing exists in our region here. Some of my funding to support churches has come actually via Wellington City Council. It just depends, but just keep your eyes open, you know, think big. If you've got a great project you want to do, but no church money to do it, don't rule out external funds. And just a quick reminder here, I won't read these out, of the ethos for Eco Church. We touched on this last week, but these are the values that, you know, we love to see integrated into churches' efforts in this space. Okay, my voice is getting tired. You're probably all tired of hearing it. A quick reminder that you can access the stories of churches for more inspiration on the Eco Church website. We've mentioned this tonight. If you're looking for an experiential and contemplative resource for your children and for the children in your church, then this Creation Care series is free to download, as are these resources for small groups. You can order them for free online as well for the donation. Okay, and I'm just going to flick through these. Many of you were here last week, so hopefully this is all familiar territory. But for next week, we've got a good time lined up. It's been great to hear your thoughts and your feedback and your ideas tonight. Yeah, here we go. We're coming up to time, so we're on track. We will be touching on the challenges and opportunities that occur when you integrate these actions longer term in your church's ministry. So some of that's to do with leadership, some of that's to do with volunteers, some of that's to do with your own self as maybe the advocate, instigating or leading in that space, your teamwork. And I'm going to invite Crystal to talk a bit more about some of the Arosha values that have sustained her and the Arosha team over 15 years doing various forms of this type of ministry. So it's going to be a good time, and I think you guys will have some really powerful stuff to share. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you as well next week. In the meantime, keep going on the website. If you're into social media, go and check out the Facebook group. Some really interesting conversations on there. One of my most favorite ones recently was about communion cups, reusable communion cups. So there was a lot of engagement from people around the country talking about what their church does in that space. All sorts of different topics come up, and you can start a good conversation on there too. I think we'll just invite Crystal now to close in prayer.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy. That was amazing. Just a quick prayer to close the session. God, Lord of all creation, lover of life and of everything, please help us to love in our own very small way what you love infinitely and everywhere. We thank you that we can offer just this one prayer, and that will be more than enough, because in reality, everything and everyone is connected and nothing stands alone. To pray for one part is to pray for the whole, and so we do. Help us each day to stand for love, for healing, for good, for the diverse unity of the body of Christ in all creation, because we know this is what you desire. As Jesus prayed, that all may be one. We offer our prayer together with all the holy names of God. We offer our prayer together with Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you, and have a great week.
Have a great week. See you next Monday.